Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monika Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hi, welcome back, everybody, to another week of Astro Chat podcast. Today, you're joined by myself, Kimberly Williams, and my amazing co-hosts, Anne Sundell and Monika Anna. And yay, the three of us are all together. That hasn't happened in a while. It's nice that we were able to coordinate schedules. This is going to be lots of fun. We're looking today at the full moon for August 30th. But before we dive in talking about it, just a little reminder that if you haven't already clicked those buttons below, whether you're on your phone or on the computer, subscribe. It really helps us out with our channel. And since we come out about once every other week, hit that notification bell, and then you'll be reminded of when our next one comes out. All right, so now that that housekeeping's out of the way, let's kind of talk about the moon that we're going to be looking at. We're looking at the full moon. And this is our second full moon in August. It is a supermoon. It is a blue moon, so it's a super blue moon. We'll talk about that in a moment. We're looking at the timestamp is 8:35 p.m. if you live here in the United States Central Time Zone. And then across the pond, that's going to put it to the following morning. So the 31st of August at 2:35 a.m. in the UK or 4:35 a.m. over in Finland. So if you have some software and you want to pull up a chart, go ahead and set it to your time zone, and we'll be pulling up a chart that we work with here in just a little bit. We're looking at the lunation of the Pisces full moon. It will be at 7 degrees, 24 minutes of Pisces. So if you are a Pisces sun or a Pisces moon or a Pisces rising, this might be especially important to you. But of course, we all have Pisces somewhere in our chart, so we're all going to be feeling this energy. A real brief overview, and I say brief, and I probably should put that in air quotes because it's not so short. There's a lot happening in the month of September. I've heard several astrologers refer to September as a messy month, a busy month. It is all those things and then some. And we're only looking at the first 2 weeks, and there's a lot happening. So I'm going to give you just some ideas of some of the highlights. And if these are significant placements in your chart, as always, go check them out. Look up some extra, YouTube, see what you can learn, because we're not going to have time to talk about all of them, but hopefully we'll touch on most. We've got, the Pisces new moon has the traditional ruler and the modern ruler. Traditionally ruled by Jupiter, modern ruler Neptune. It's going to make aspects to both of them. Starts off making a sextile to Jupiter, and within hours, it's going to be conjunct that Neptune. There's a total of 8 planets that have the potentiality of going retrograde. 7 of the 8 are either retrograde or going retrograde during this 2-week window. So as they say, get tied on for a bumpy ride. And the nodal axis, as we've talked about before, it has shifted now. We're dealing with the Aries Libra energy, which means the rulers are Mars and Venus. And, there's some things happening. Mars is in its fall in Libra, continues to be, and pretty much is, for all intents and purposes, unaspected. And then Jupiter is finishing up her retrograde motion and is going to make a square to the other benefic Jupiter. So we're probably going to unpack that one at length. The sun will be cazimi Mercury. Mercury is going to have a retrograde that we're going to talk about started back on the 23rd of August, going until the 15th of September, between 21 and 8 degrees Virgo, if that is meaningful for you. We're going to have Venus finish her retrograde that started in July. It'll end, if you're here in the States, September 3rd late at night. Overseas, September 4th. She has started out at 28 Leo and is wrapping up her retrograde at 12 Leo. And yeah, we've got Jupiter's going to go retrograde on September 4th at 15 degrees of Taurus, Saturn is continuing to be retrograde, which started back in June. It'll be traveling from 3 degrees to 1 degrees Pisces this month, hardly moving. Uranus went retrograde just hours prior to this lunation at 23 degrees of Taurus, and it'll be staying retrograde until we get into next year in January. And of course, Pluto is getting ready to wrap up, but hasn't finished yet. Its retrograde that started back on May 1st. It'll be retrograde all month until we get into October. So, wow, that's a whole lot. And we will tackle as much of that as we can in the next hour. But before we start unpacking all these exciting things, I think Anne's going to start us off by talking about the Sabian symbol of this exciting lunation.
Thank you, Kimberly. Yeah, we have the Sabian symbol for Pisces 8 degrees, and it's a girl blowing a bugle, and it tells about rebelliousness as a sign of coming change. And I think it gave me a really creative vibe when I was looking at that Sabian symbol. Also, I think that we have a very changeable chart. We have a chart that's giving us different opportunities, directions to maybe things to choose from, and then we also have a mutable sign. So yeah, it's interesting symbol for this month.
It's really interesting. When I think about blowing a bugle, I was telling you guys earlier, my brain goes to that song from the 40s, the bugle boy from Company B. And I just want to start dancing, and I become very just fun and ungrounded, which feels very Piscean. Because at first I was thinking, how's that Pisces? But there is something about this degree of Pisces. And as we've been talking prior to this recording and unpacking, there's just something about this lunation that is pulling me into a fun, free, and very ungrounded and, kind of state. I just want to listen to music and dance and play.
Yeah. I do wonder as well, because the sounding a horn or blowing a bugle, that's a call to action, isn't it? Like something's happening, someone wakes you up. And we're talking about full moon in Pisces. We're talking about the Sabian symbol being in Pisces. It's like you're dreaming and, you may be half asleep or you're in that kind of daydream. And when you hear that noise, you can't just not snap out of that because it's a potent sound. So there is something about, I think, about this Sabian symbol and this potent full moon that is actually calling us to action, which we'll probably unpack. But I kind of feel like with the full moon in Pisces, which again, it's bringing that energy of Pisces. It's always the sun and the moon in opposition for every full moon. We have already our emotions heightened, and in Pisces, our dreams and our kind of imaginaries running wild. Our spirituality opens up. We're more receptive, we're more sensitive. And suddenly when you hear that noise, it's like a fire alarm, right? Sometimes it's like it just wakes you up and shakes you up. But then the question is, what do you do with that? Do you actually go and do you treat that as call to action and take all the dreams and all that energy? It's like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll dance my dream awake, as they say. Or you're just going to get into shock. It's like, what just happened? I had this beautiful dream, and suddenly it's just like, the rude awakening, right? So we have this beautiful Piscean moon. Like I said, Pisces it's about mystical and metaphorical, and about our unconscious, our dreams, the world of imaginary, the fairy tales, the archetypes coming to life through us. It's about collective, about connecting with something bigger than you. It doesn't matter what you believe, doesn't matter where you are on your spiritual path or whether you do have a spiritual path. The Pisces energy is about connecting with something bigger than you, with something in life that is bigger than you and your ego, that can be a calling, you know, in your work. You might not have a spiritual path, but you might be a nurse, and that calling, doing something that is bigger than just a job and a career and that monthly paycheck, but feeling that calling, feeling how much of your presence and your work of service is actually helping others, that might be something that inspires you and creates that, you know, that connection with the world, with the collective, with the human race as a whole. I was saying earlier on that every time, and I've mentioned that on a few podcasts, that every time when we record podcasts, it doesn't matter how close to the moon, to that lunation we're recording, we can be 3 weeks away, but for some reason we're picking up that energy. And today I just felt so ungrounded and so intoxicated. That's a great word for Pisces as well, being intoxicated, not necessarily by alcohol, drugs, although that's also part of Piscean energy, but just sometimes you're just intoxicated with life. You know, the birds are singing, you know, the sun is out. In UK we had weeks and weeks of, you know, cold and rain over the whole July August. So actually seeing sun and blue sky is like, you're just intoxicated with the everything's going on. So this is the beauty of energy of Pisces. It makes you open to the world. It makes you creative as well in a different way that Leo does, and it brings that that gentle, compassionate side that wants to connect with something. So I'm really interested, and I'll unpack that blowing a bugle, that Sabian symbol, when we'll look actually at the aspect. But I'll pause here for now.
Anne, you want to dive in, or you want me to?
Just go ahead.
All right. So I love what you were saying about intoxicated. That does feel very much like a word that feels Piscean. No judgment. It doesn't have to be those things like alcohol and drugs, right? I mean, if you watch documentaries about people who go on these amazing mountain treks, you can see, you know, they've spent time away from the world and in nature. They have this, you know, they call it here the Rocky Mountain High kind of look of, you know, that oneness with something, right? Or if you are looking, working, meditating, reading about different gurus or people who do meditation classes, and they're in that zone, that one with spirit. Again, there's always this look of just peace and otherworldliness. You know, there's something about Pisces that takes us across out of this mundane world and into, it could be fantasy, it could be spirituality, but it's that idea of stepping away from the everyday, ordinary, hard fact side of life, the getting up and the doing and the routines. It's the other side. It's opposite Virgo. Virgo would be like, let's deal with the hard facts and routines and things. And Pisces is like, let's step away from that. And I think when we use it well, then it's that I'm unplugging from everyday life. I'm unplugging from that Saturnian realm, and I'm plugging into something else. It's like, what is it that I can have faith in? I think of Pisces as very akin to faith. We talk a lot about Sagittarius being faith, but Sagittarius is what is the path that will lead me to what is beyond? Pisces is the what is beyond. You know, what is it? And so whether that is a spiritual seeking for, you know, what is God, goddess, all that is, whether that's a being in nature, it's important to have something we tune into, that we connect with, because the regular world, we're unconnected. There's a moment here of, as Monika was saying, being ungrounded, you know, not being part of the everyday life. What is not ordinary and everyday may come to the surface. And if we work with it well, we can so benefit and get recharged and be inspired and maybe reconnect with our vision about where we want to be headed. And if we don't work with it, then there can be that overwhelm of, I need to escape. I'm just tuning out rather than tuning in. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm really feeling this kind of Piscean energy, and it's like I'm reaching for those words. So I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, this sign is not the easiest one to get the grip of. I mean, I think Pisces is the most. Pisces is sometimes seen like as a weak sign, but I don't think that Pisces is a weak sign. I think Pisces is one of the strongest, absolutely strongest water signs that we have. Like a Pisces can swim through any oceans, and they will find a way, because they're like like Pisces. They're going like with the flow, and they can sense where it is, that where you should go, where you should head right now. And I think that's like the intuition and the listening to the positive sides of the sign that you can have, like that heightened spirituality, that sense. I mean, of course, it can be very draining when you're really sensitive, and you need to find the time to gather your energy. And I mean, I feel Pisces is also very idealistic, often want to help out a lot, and you need to set your boundaries there too. But it's a wonderful sign for finding that higher realms that you, and also to be able to find the core of the spirituality. I mean, it's, yeah. And I have really hard time also to focus with this chart. It's really, you feel like you're floating around a bit more than usual.
I mean, listening to both of you, I have two pictures in my head. So one, actually, thank you for bringing up that Pisces is a really strong sign, because I think we really, really do underestimate that side. You know, we're talking about spirituality and this kind of beautiful connection. But Pisces is usually kind of connected to the ocean, right? And imagine being in a boat in the middle of Pacific Ocean. It's just you and the ocean. It's scary. It's overwhelming. You know, if that wave, you know, few feet tall wave is coming at you, there is nowhere to hide. This is Piscean energy. You know, this is kind of connecting with this is what it means, connect with collective. There is no escaping through it. If that wave is coming at you, you're just hoping you've learned enough to either hold your breath to be able to swim to the surface, or being able to surf that wave. But that wave coming at you whether you want it or not. So yeah, it really is underestimated, I think, the way we talk. And the one thing that I was also thinking, Kimberly, when you were talking, the picture that I had in my mind about this kind of intoxicating kind of, it's those movies, the fairies movies, when you walk through the woods and you're on the errand somewhere, you're going to a next village, or you're going to get some, you know, wood, and then you step through into the fairy realm.
Yeah.
And there's this party, there is the food, you know, there's the drink, the colors, the music, and then you stepped out, not even knowing. And then, like, you know, you're going back to your village, the village is not there, there is a town, turns out you were gone for 30 years,
Right.
you know, that kind of, this is the energy of Pisces. It's just like it snaps you out and back into reality. So it's interesting, and this is where we're talking, you know, this is the numinous space, this is the in-between space, as I usually call it, where you can step in and out of different realities. You know, whether just in your own mind, you know, going into creative space and then snap back into more practical you, or in those spiritual realms, you know. And I have a great story actually about Pisces and Saturn. I know, Kimberly, that you wanted to start us off with some of the aspects of the moon, but if you don't mind, I
Go
have a
for
great
it.
story. We have full moon in Pisces, which we just said is the intoxication and so on. And we also have this full moon sitting very close to Saturn. They're conjunct. And Saturn is all about structure and, you know, kind of being grounded. And Saturn also, you know, rules the bones in your body, especially the backbone, right? And I always think about Saturn as the structure of the house, the staircase, and so on. So when we're talking about intoxication, you know, you don't have to go to you know, a monastery in Nepal to experience that. Yoga studio is a great place to do that. You go in, you work with your body, you work with your breath, you go into completely different zone. You go into that place of no time, no space. You kind of zone out completely, you know, so to speak, wording intended. And then at the end of the session, you might have savasana, you might meditate a bit, which is what happened to me. I was leaving my yoga studio completely intoxicated by that space, by the breath, by the gong. And I was going down the stairs. I slipped and damaged my back in 3 places.
Ooh.
And here was my Saturn coming for me. So this is an interesting actually energy that we have at this full moon as well. We have Saturn sitting so close to the full moon. So that intoxication, when you're daydreaming, be careful you don't walk in front of the bus, because you cross the street. Like, let's give Saturn what Saturn demands from us. So let's respect the Saturn and make sure when you have a yoga studio and I have to go down a wooden staircase, may I add, you make sure you hold the rail, you pay attention, and don't do what I did.
Yeah. Ow. Ow.
Yeah.
Another word that's coming to me instead of intoxication, because that has kind of connotations for some people, is bliss. And yeah, when you're in that place, that state of mind of being blissed out, it is very hard to function in the physical world. And I think that's a perfect example of why Pisces is so challenging for so many people, because it isn't that most of us don't want to get to a place of being blissed out. It's that it's very hard to function in this world in that state. So if I was to, leave and go on a retreat somewhere, and I have a guide who's taking me by the hand from room to room so I don't go flying down the staircase, right? And everything is very calm. That's easy. But when it's over, you have that moment, that hour of an amazing sound bowl session, and then we have to get in the car and drive. Right? It's important to stop and ground, to become present, to come back into this physical world. And I think that's where it can be rough with Pisces, because we feel that sharp push-pull between how do I hold both this space and mindset and awareness and that space and mindset and awareness. And it can be difficult and sometimes impossible to have them both simultaneously. So yeah, it's a really good analogy about what happens when we start bringing Pisces energy in and then clash with Saturn or some of those other more structured type energies.
It's the clash with reality, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever been, like you say, on a retreat and then you leave that beautiful, sacred, blissful space, and especially if you travel to a middle of the city, I did that, and the cacophony of the sound and smells and colors, and going into a tube in London, it was an actual shock to the system, because it just feels like you literally just arrived from a different world. So this is the full moon energy that we're meeting. So it's beautiful. It will be powerful. But me by now, I love my Saturn. Let's give Saturn what Saturn deserves. So let's check that when we come out from a blissful retreat, someone maybe is there to drive us.
Yes. Or give yourself the time. Speaking of Saturn, giving yourself the time.
Right.
Well, when I was younger, I would go backpacking for 2 weeks every summer. And I remember coming back, and my first 3 or 4 days back, when the phone would ring, I would come unglued. It was so shocking to my system. And my mother was very wise, and she used to say, you're coming back and you're not doing anything for 3 days, because you need time to integrate, to get back into like this reality from that reality. And it was so true that, sometimes we just get into rush. So recognizing that doing Piscean work takes energy and time and strength, but returning also can take energy and time and strength. Yeah. And before we dive into the other aspects we mentioned during the intro, so let's maybe flesh that out, that this is a supermoon and it's a blue moon. So supermoons are when the full moon coincides with when the moon is at its closest approach to Earth, right? Because that orbit is not a perfect circle. It's a egg shape. It's an ellipse. And so there are times every month when the moon is closest and the moon is furthest. And you have on average about once every 2-ish years where the full moon coincides with that closest approach. So it's huge and it's big. Although lately it seems like we've been having it more than once every 2 years. Seems like we're in that pattern. But statistically, that's kind of, it's not the norm, but it's not unheard of. right? And as you were saying, Monica, it's like big and huge and round and in the sky. You could reach out and touch it because it is closer. It does appear much larger. So that will most likely intensify all of the energy, the Pisces energy, and the aspects that we're about to dive into and unpack. And then it's also a blue moon, which is not really an astrological concept, but it certainly is flying around on social media everywhere. And for earth-based religion, cosmology kind of folk, it can be a big deal. And so it is a blue moon. There's two definitions. It is either considered the second full moon in a month, right? We had one at the very beginning of the month, and now we have this one. Or it is considered a fourth full moon within a quarter, meaning from an equinox to a solstice. You have those 3 months that divide them, and 3 months, you have one full moon a month, that equals 3, wherever the fourth one happens to land. So either of those can be a definition for a blue moon. And even though that doesn't necessarily have an astrological connotation, I still think it's kind of interesting that it brings up this idea of rarity, of not the norm, of stepping out of sync with, and that to me feels very in line with what you were just sharing about Pisces energy, right? We're not necessarily in the norm of day to day. There's something a little different that might maybe come up from this blue moon kind of zone. All right. So if you guys are ready, I'll pull up the chart and we can start unpacking what we see. So here we are. Here's our lovely chart. Of course, we do an Aries wheel because we're in 3 different time zones and locations. So not paying any attention to the respective houses involved. But just looking at this lunation, we've got, as Monica mentioned, the moon and Saturn are highly engaged. Our moon is at 7 degrees Pisces, Saturn's at 3. We're going to see that within the next 24 hours, that moon will have moved and made it to 26 of Pisces and be conjunct Neptune. The moon is currently making a sextile on one side to Jupiter, which is at 15 Taurus. So interesting that a Pisces moon is making contact to its modern ruler Neptune and its traditional ruler Pisces, both. And then on the other side, towards the top of the chart, that moon is also going to, as it's transiting through Pisces, it will at some point make a sextile to Pluto up at 28 of Capricorn. So a lot of lunar activity happening, and there will also be an opposition to Mercury. So wow, that's just a lot to unpack right there. I like what you were saying, Monica, and maybe that's a good place for us to begin about the moon and Saturn, that there's this moon of our emotions and our unconscious in Pisces, helping us to really disconnect. And it starts off conjunct Saturn just hours before the full moon was exact. It was exactly conjunct Saturn. Like there's this moment of reality check, I would imagine, from Saturn. This, let's get grounded, and maybe we have to pull some of our dreams back to this place in reality. For me, the whole transit of Saturn and Pisces has been interesting because there's this vacillation I find between I have this big dream and it's bigger than life, and then I have the reality check and it's like somebody took a pin and popped my balloon, and I'm being overly cynical, skeptical, overly realistic, and then I'm back and so there's this ping pong. And I think some of the challenge and the lessons we have during the coming year of Saturn going through Neptune, Saturn going through Pisces is, where are you at now, and what is your vision, and how are you going to take the next step towards that vision? It isn't about being here or being there. It's about how do we move forward? How do we take responsibility? How do we take action? So it's like important on one hand to not lose sight of the dream or the goal or the vision. It's important to recognize, what do I need so that I can move towards it? And I think that could be really challenging, and we could get some external things hitting us around this lunation, around those reminders of what do I need in terms of reality, physical resources in my world.
And Saturn doesn't, I mean, Saturn in Pisces, it's not so easy to work with for that planet. I mean, it's not straight lines here. We're trying to like find the boundaries that are not really there, visible or that obvious to us maybe. So it's really like trying to like you said, it's like you have these dreams and you reality check is kind of harsh. And also with this chart, when we're having opposing, we have Virgo on the other side. It's really practical. We entered Virgo season. We have Mercury there. It's highlighting also that aspect of the life, the focus on details and all, like have to be sharp, but at the same time, you really just want to go maybe read your favorite poems or something like that. So it's really like, yeah, maybe you can combine it, writing some new poems.
Yeah. I mean, for me, in a weird way, Saturn can help with, so to speak, with manifestations, because Saturn is basically helping us turn our dreams into reality. You know, sitting on a sofa, watching Netflix and dreaming about, you know, being a movie star or, I don't know, a famous marathon runner or something. It's not going to get you there. You need a bit of Saturn. You need that vision of who you want to be, where you want to be, what you want to do. And that's the Pisces, you know, that kind of like, I want to dream the big dream, the kind of dream that scares me. But Saturn is the one that will tell you, okay, we need to practice, we need to go for it, we need to, you know, do some work, we need to send some CVs, we need to approach some agents, we need to go for a run in the morning. That's the one that actually helps you get the job done. And in terms of spirituality, I feel like Saturn brings that balance. You know, when we go too much into those other worlds, we can get lost. And like we've just said earlier, coming back to reality can be shocking, can be, you know, can be difficult for any you know, religion or spiritual group. There is always this practice of creating a sacred space, you know, and either cleansing it or protecting it before you know, you're doing something sacred. And, you know, whether we're talking about Catholic Church or a Wiccan circle, you have that, you know, in Catholic Church, you go into a sacred ground, into a temple, right? And you usually, you know, bless yourself with holy water, that kind of cleansing idea, before the idea of transformation of, you know, and transfiguration of wine and bread into the blood and a body of the Christ happens. The same thing happens in the pagan circle, right? This is for me the kind of how Pisces and Saturn works together. You're creating a space outside of time. Technically, what happens in a church on Sunday, right, with a holy mass, for example, or what happens in the on the full moon or the new moon, the Wiccan circle, it's something that happens outside of time. It's the mythical, you know, mythological, divine timing that we're stepping into. And we're creating a Saturnian boundary around that. And then when we come out of that, of communing with the spirit, of communing with God, again, you know, whatever you want to choose, you then, you know, you come out of that. Simple idea with meditation, you know, very often people will have a bell ringing at the start of meditation, bell ringing at the end. Those are the kind of Saturnian structures that helps you kind of go from one world into another and then come out. And I think Saturn and Pisces can work well together if neither of them, if they understand their function and we don't worship one over the other. You know, if we lose ourselves in that Piscean world, we can become intoxicated with that world, whatever that is. And then we're losing the groundness of the Saturn. If we're going too much towards Saturn, we can become so fossilized that the structures become more important, that the spiritual experience that they're supposed to sustain and support. So I think they can work well together. We just need to make sure that they are assigned or aligned with the functions that they should be supporting and not the other ones.
Yeah. And I think that Mercury too helps bring in that routine kind of element of Virgo energy. Those spiritual practices, yes, they take discipline, which we need from Saturn, and they help us connect with spirit, which brings in that Pisces, but they also take repetition. A practice is something we do not once in a while. It's one thing to say, I'm going to go into the mountains and I haven't been there in 2 years and go bliss out. It's another thing to say, I'm going to go every Sunday and take a walk in nature. Or, if you are an athlete, before you dive off the high diving board to do that perfect plunge, you've practiced a million times from the side of the pool and the lower board, and you've built the muscle memory and it has become a part of you. I think the same is true with spiritual practice, that are we doing the things that help us to stay grounded when we open up? Are we meditating, if that's the practice we need? Are we going outside and planting our feet in the ground? What is it that we do in our daily life? Are we eating? Are we eating food so that our body is supported? Are we getting sleep and rest? Because often what I find is the vision is so big, it can be all consuming. And we run into that and we think about all the work we have to do, but not about how do we make that work sustainable over time. And to me, this is that sustainable over time is like a blending of a Mercury Virgo with Saturn Pisces. It has to be sustainable. It can't just be you had a one-hit wonder this week and wow, I achieved my vision, but now I don't reach that vision again for the next month. No, we need to keep it going. We need to have routine. We need to have habits. We need things to be sustainable. We need to feel grounded so we can leave the ground, touch that vision, and then come back. And then we've also got, that moon is making 2 quincunxes, right? Or quincunxi. How do you say plural quincunx? Anybody knows? Put that in the comments, because obviously my English isn't up to speed on that one. But we have a quincunx happening on the one side of the opposition. There is a quincunx happening with Venus in Leo. And then on the other side, there's a quincunx with Mars. So the moon starts off quincunx Mars, and as it's transiting, winds up making quincunx to Venus. And again, these are the rulers of the nodal axis, and not necessarily in the strongest placement because of their sign and their aspects and retrogrades and things. And so now we have that quincunx, which is an aspect about an adjustment needs to be made, is the way I often think about it. Something is, it's not quite like I can see my opponent if we're in an opposition. We can find a middle peaceful point. We can negotiate. I can't negotiate with something that's just outside of my peripheral vision. I have to turn to face it. I have to bring things into view. So perhaps this reality check of sorts that we are experiencing, either internally or externally from the Saturn contact, maybe that's useful in helping us to realign our perspective about things. And I can't help but wonder, since the nodal axis is now Aries Libra, how many of us did the nodal axis shifted, I'm ready to go, I've been chomping at the bit, and we jump off in good Aries fashion and ran forward, and whoops, maybe we need to stop, take 2 steps back, think about the timeline, think about how am I going to implement this vision now that I have energy or less obstacles. Like this almost feels like a back to the drawing board. It isn't a total do-over, but it is definitely a let's tweak things and start again. And you guys might have different perceptives there, but that kind of something that just has been gnawing at me a bit is what's going on with that Venus and Mars.
I mean, Venus is still in her retrograde journey. She still has not stopped to go direct. So we're still deep into that, looking into our values and what we value and what beauty means to us and what relationship means to us. And here is this Pisces full moon making the aspects to 2 kind of relationship planets, right? The planet of Mars and planet of Venus, asking us, like, it's beautiful to have dream, but where's the action, Mars? How do you put boundaries? And what is it that you actually value? I mean, it's great dream, but is it actually aligned with your values? And there is a bit, because it's a quincunx, there is a bit of tension there, because it's not quite opposition, it's not quite, square. It's this place where they're just not quite seeing one another. So it might just feels a bit like that itch that you can't scratch. So yeah, it's interesting. And like you say, both of those planets that making that aspect to the full moon, they're the nodal rulers. So they're actually the one guiding our nodal, well, ruling our nodal axis at the moment for the next couple years. So yeah, there's definitely something about relationship and putting boundaries. Are we okay to put boundaries? Mars is in Venus sign in Libra, you know, it's like, how can I be mediator and try to balance everything and still be able to say no, still be able to put my boundaries in place? And, you know, how can I really understand what I want? You know, because there's, again, with dreams, for me, there are difference between dreams and visions, right? We have the dreams that we sometimes dream, and they're just fantasies, or maybe I should say the word fantasy, not necessarily vision. You know, the kind of the dream that we have and the fantasy that we have. And the fantasy, when it meets Saturn, it crumbles because it's fantasy, it's mirage, it's the kind of, you know, something that you see in the desert that is not really there. Where the dream, when it meets Saturn, it actually has opportunity to be grounded, to be built, to be created. And I think this is a little bit of that aspect there as well. You know, do I have the fantasy, or did I actually do my Venusian work over the last few days, few weeks? Did I go really deep down into what is it that I desire? I mean, every time I say that, I see the TV series Lucifer. What is it that you desire? You know, this is for me quintessential Venus, you know, going down into the underworld. Go down straight into that question. What is it that you deep down desire? And that TV series had such a brilliant premise, right? It's just that simple question that was opening up people and revealing the truth, and was helping out Vissy solve the murders. I mean, clearly I'm biased here, but loved the Lucifer TV series, Lucifer Morningstar. But yeah, what is it that you desire? And is it aligned with your dream, or is it aligned with the fantasy?
Yeah. And you know that Mars has some interesting things happening. I think, Anne, you brought up a really insightful point earlier. You want to share about your thoughts on that Mars position?
Yeah, when I'm talking about what Monica was talking about this, how you put your dreams in, like how you get started with what you want to do, then when you look at the chart, you can see almost like a kite figure here with Mars, Neptune, kind of opposition, kind of, I would say, and then with Pluto and Uranus that's stationed, making a small trine. So we get almost like a kite. That's, I associate with a lot of different directions, like talents, like possibilities. But Mars is going to be like the motor. It's going to be on the downside, and Neptune's going to be like the direction of the kite. Mars is not really making the main aspects. I mean, the opposition to Neptune is not very in orb, really tight. So I would consider that Mars being like unaspected, and when it's also in its fall sign, like in Libra, it's not that strong. So I mean, when we're gonna start the motor, that's maybe not so easy to get started in this sign. And there's also these different sides of everything that we want to be sure of, that we have considered everything before we're getting like to action. So the action might not be like the easiest part of this figuration to manage. And yeah.
I keep getting the sound in my head is that I keep hearing is the hurry up and wait. No, you're ready to take action, but we're not able to take action. And now we're ready to take action, but we're not ready. It's like when you go out, you got the car is packed, you've got the map, you downloaded your GPS, you're ready to go, and you're cranking the car, and the engine just won't turn over because you didn't put gas in the tank or something. Like there's that push, that desire to go, but yet we really can't. And And something that keeps hitting me is you were mentioning with that Sabian symbol about the bugle, and Monica was saying how it's like, it's a call to action. And I keep thinking it's like a call to arms. Like, take up arms, get ready to take the fight, take your fight out there, do the things you want to put your energy into. And yet at the same time, this configuration is also disarming, which is, put that battle gear down, take a moment to breathe, smell the roses, remember the vision, remember why we're doing the work that we're doing before we jump into doing the work. And so there's very much this like push-pull betwixt and between kind of vibe that I'm sensing or feeling with this Mars energy.
Yeah, and with the unaspected planet, it can be like on off. It can be like going 100% and then just zero. And that might be really unconscious. It's not so easy to get a grip of that yourself. Like to have it comes and goes like wants to. Still, there's it's an important player in this chart, and it might be very good to examine that more in how it's going to play out in your life, and how do you feel that, and where can you like maybe get that activated in a way that's possible for you. But also I think it might create some frustrations, like with Mars. Usually when you can't get it to function, it's going to be frustrating in between.
Yeah, lots of frustration and angst, I would think, with that Mars, and anger and irritation, and the list goes on. Yeah.
Well, going deeper into our soup of all the transits, like you said, we have so many planets that either retrograding or they're stopping to go backwards, and obviously not literally. There is not a planet in the sky that go like, oh, stop, let me turn around, come back. But it just feels like you say, like the whole sky above you decide to go into opposite direction. And that even on that kind of on that level, on that archetypal level, when you look at that and say, okay, actually every star just changed direction, is going, in an opposite it's in opposite motion. It feels like, it's that call to go and review things. It's like, don't rush. If you want to rush, and if you want to go ahead and everyone tells you just slow down, just rethink, just check, like you say, going back to your metaphor about the car, check your car, make sure that you have all the checks, all the liquids in the car, that your tires are all right, before you actually go on a journey. I think we're so used to, in our world, in our Western world, to just always go, 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 that we don't have that. And nature, every now and then, nature reminds us that there are times when there is a growth and blossoming, and there are times when, you need to withdraw. And we have that during the solar cycle, when the winter is the time when we just need to withdraw a little bit, retreat, retire into our houses, into ourselves. And then you have obviously the summer, the Leo season, where we're just in bloom. We have that during the moon cycle every month, from the new moon to the full moon, and that energy is high. And we also have that with the planets. For me, the retrograde planets are the one where tell me, okay, pick the topic connected with that planet, the archetype, the energy connected with that planet, and if it goes retro, go with it. Just review and rethink what the planet relates to. So whether it's Venus, go and have reflect on your relationship, on your values, on the beauty around you, on the desires that you have. Reflect on that from time to time. If it's Saturn, have a look at the structures. Is your house need a structural change? Is your relationship, is your life, like, have time with that planet to connect. There was someone, I was running this group, and there was someone on a call asking me, how do I connect to the planet? And I thought that was such a lovely question, and such a good question. And I was thinking about it, like, how, like, but actually I think this is exactly what I do. I pick that archetype and I connect, I see that world around me as an enchanted place, and I do connect with that archetype, and I will literally just take time to say, okay, what do you want to teach me? You slow down, you stopped and slow down for me, and you're trying to go over the same place in the sky to show me something there. What is it there for me to pay attention to? If you know your chart, the planets will usually retrograde in the same area of sky, so you can look at the house, not just on the zodiac, but also at the house in your chart, which will indicate which area of life you need to look into. Is Venus retro in Leo, talking about your home life because it's in your 4th house? Is it talking about, the 9th house, the house of publishing and higher learning, and the meaning that you draw from life? Or 7th house of your relationship? Like, where is it that you can actually pay attention? And I think this is what the retrograde planets invite us. So even though this energy of this full moon is so heighten, I think it's the heighten to go within your world rather than without at this moment in time. I think that's how I feel about this new moon. Yes, let's do that energy, but go within our dream, unpack that dream, see that dream in like full color, before then, when the planet will move forward and will move that energy or move you with that energy, you will then be able to unfold that dream.
That's beautiful. I love that. Very Piscean. I love it. Yeah. And so let's not forget too about Venus. We've been talking about Mars as one of the nodal rulers. There's also Venus, and she's getting ready to wrap up her retrograde dance, right? We talked about this in our last podcast a lot about the Venus retrograde and that cycle. The Venus retrograde in Leo is every 8 years, if that is meaningful for you. But we're looking at, she's coming to a close of being in the underworld, of being hidden, of taking us on that deep dive into what do we desire. And sometimes thinking about what I desire can be a little scary. There's reasons maybe that I haven't pursued those desires, but she's about to turn stationary and stop. She started her retrograde back at the end of July on the 22nd, and it's going to be the evening of the 3rd of September here or the morning of the 4th of September overseas, where she's going to stop. She's going to go direct at around 12 degrees of Leo. So there's something really significant here about what did we learn during that time? Did we play? Did we let our hair down? Did we start the relationship everyone told us not to? Did we get the haircut that every astrologer said don't do? Did we go get the tattoo? But did we have fun? Or did we wait and now we're ready to do it? Like whatever that Leo type of journey was about, did our inner child get connected? Did we play? And I think there's a lot of power when a planet stations. There's so much power there because that is a moment of like downloading the energy. We may have had the experience, but here's sort of that experience encapsulated into a seed that's getting planted in our mind. So draw this energy down and connect with your own inner divine feminine, or however you want to word that. I think it can be really powerful, and she's getting ready to emerge, right? We've been talking about this the last couple podcasts. She's going to emerge as that morning star, full of, vim and vigor. And in ancient Mesopotamian, era, that was the battle cry. Like, I'm here, I'm ready, and all the gods would go see Venus to get their weapons. She was ready to dole them out if you were worthy. So, this is a time to really think about what I desire, what do I deserve as a human, as this beautiful soul that's here, and how am I going to attract it? How am I going to pull that towards me? Really, really interesting. We do have a little challenge though with her there because she's going to station, she's going to reappear as that morning star, but she's still in her post shadow until we get to the beginning of October. And in the next 2 weeks, she will actually square exactly Jupiter. While Jupiter's retrograde and she's gone direct, there'll be that moment on the 17th of September when the two of them are kind of battling each other out. The benefics are locked in, a tour de force, as it were, between the Taurus energy of what we resist, perhaps, right? And that Leo energy of where I want to shine. So there might be some work still to do about who resists letting me shine, or do I resist my own shining, or what is going on with the maintaining the status quo the way it's always been, kind of Taurus, with the how I want to put my fire out there. What do you guys think about Venus squaring Jupiter?
It's going to be a long square. It's going to be long square, given that obviously Venus was in a retrograde, is still in a retrograde motion, but Venus first square was 22nd of August. The last one will be 18th of September, but they will have this play within the 2-3 degree orb for a while. So it's interesting because Jupiter is in Venus sign. So he she is the ruler. She tells him what to do, which I love. And her re-emerging now in the sky as a morning star, as the warrior princess. I always think of Venus in the morning star as the Xena, the warrior princess. She will tell him what to do and how to act. So I like that power dynamic. If I can show my own bias here. But you have this dance of two benefics in the sky. Traditionally, those two planets were considered lucky planets, and good planets. And as much as I don't kind of subscribe to that, because I think my views on Saturn by now, but I think there is something beautiful of two blessings coming together. And even though it's a square, it's the tension between them. There's still the tension of we're bringing you good stuff. Is just like, can you handle all that goodness? Can you handle me? Can you handle that much? So I do think that there is element of the blessings there. There's the element of positive circumstances, positive meetings, bringing that, how to say that? Bringing that energy of auspicious circumstances and people into your life, with that creative, tense square. But with Venus and Jupiter, it will, again, I think it will go back to what is it that you desire. And also what comes to mind when I'm looking at that square is watch out what you wish for, because you might just get it. The idea of I want to win the lottery, and then you do, and then half of the family hates you. Or I want to become this famous actor, and then you do, and again you're losing family. Like, watch out what you wish for. I feel like with that, Venus and Jupiter is very much like Aladdin, not Aladdin, the genie in a bottle type of energy. We can bring you so much, but is it what you want? Is it what you need? Is it what you desire? Going back to that Venus, she's re-emerging victorious. She's re-emerging from her underground journey. She should know what she wants and stick to it. And sometimes actually the best blessing you can have is say, no, thank you. I don't want to go out. I want to have a night in, I don't want to go on that journey. I want a day in a house, like, what is it that when is too much? How to say, when the good stuff is what you need, and when is it just too much to handle? I think, sorry, I just have another really random thought, is the too hot to handle. I think it's on Netflix, the too hot to handle. It's like Venus and Jupiter, too hot to handle. I think that might be the title of the episode. With the full moon actually being big and orange in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that unexpected Mars and everything's like kind of too hot here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with Monika on that. Venus and Jupiter square, what it can give you and what do you really want. So yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing to add to that one.
And how much are you willing to pay for what you want? I think that with Jupiter squaring,
So good.
right, with Jupiter squaring Venus, there's the I know what I want, but how much time is that going to take? I want to do this new side hustle, but I already have one. And so, do I have the time and the hours? Going back to that, am I going to sacrifice my nutrition or my sleep or my, as we were saying earlier, like, am I sacrificing the things that I need to be grounded in order to get what I want? And I think sometimes when Jupiter is hard aspected, what often happens is we just don't recognize limitations. So we spend too much money, we don't take care of our body the way we need to. We just think we have an unlimited supply of energy or resource, and that can be a real challenge because what I want might take more time. Going back to, we started with Saturn, so I'm going to end there. Like, maybe it's this is what I want, but that doesn't mean, I keep hearing that song, I know what I want and I want it now. But maybe Venus and Mars both need to like readjust a bit to recognize we can get what we want, but not necessarily right now, not without doing the work, not without, patience to get there. Yeah.
I think, again, I'm just being very Piscean today, and most of the things that coming up to me is actual visual, not necessarily words. I think I'm losing words today.
How Piscean.
But it's the visual. Yeah, I know, right? But the visual. And when we're talking about Jupiter, Venus, and also this full moon in Pisces, I have the story of the Little Mermaid in my head. The mermaid that had this big dream of being human and having soul and having two legs. But there was a price to pay. She had to give up the voice. And again, thinking about Jupiter in Taurus, Taurus rules our throat, right? So it's that, is the price for what you want, the price that you're willing to pay? This is the question. Is it what you desire? What brings your heart desire? Venus in Leo. What is really, really at the core of your heart desire? Are you willing to pay that price? Jupiter in Taurus. And that story, with Disney is a different story than when you actually read the original, So yeah, it's a powerful story. And I think this is what fairy tales were teaching us. Fairy tales are very much a language, Piscean language. They teach us through the symbolic language about what our soul and our psyche needs. So yeah, if you don't know the original Little Mermaid story, go ahead and read through it. I think that's going to be my tip. Here you go. I didn't think of a tip of the of the week, so to speak, and I think that I just found one. Read the story of Little Mermaid and think about Piscean moon and your dreams and the price you're willing to pay for them.
Awesome. And I think too, this tells us like sometimes the answer isn't yes or no. It's not either this or that. It can be an and both. It can be the price I'm paying, the way I'm doing it right now is too high. So let me modify the way I'm doing it so I don't have to pay that price and I can still have my cake and eat it too. And I think that when Mercury is retrograde is a perfect time to recognize when we've gotten caught in that mind trap of things are black or white. It's either yes or no. Either I stay home or I go out. I could invite friends over. I could pick up food and bring it home. Like, there are other options besides things are either this or this. But it can be really easy to get into that kind of polarized mindset of this is the way I need to do things. This is the way it has to go. I can't put the cart before the horse, as it were. Mercury retrograde in Virgo is a perfect time to go back to the drawing board, review. How am I doing things? Look at the details. How am I doing things? What are the measurements? What are the steps? Maybe, I could give more time. Maybe instead of giving myself one day off every week, I can take one day off every month. Maybe there's, how do we modify and how do we internally negotiate so we can get to having our desires met, but still having our needs met? And I feel like this can be such a useful, I always feel that way when Mercury's retrograde in Virgo, because, I'm very partial to Virgo energy. But Mercury in Virgo is useful if we are willing to just rethink what we're doing and how we're doing it. It isn't about doing it or not doing it. It's about finding a way to do it a little differently, or going back and doing something we didn't finish before we step into this new thing, so that we have what we need in place to move forward. And for those who didn't hear the dates at the beginning of our podcast, we're looking at this retrograde began about the week before this lunation on August 23rd, and it's going to run until September 15th. You're looking at anywhere from 8 to 21 degrees Virgo being prominent. If those are important in your chart, that's the journey of retrograde we're moving past. But we're in the post shadow of this all month, really, until we get to the end of September. But there's an important moment. Mercury, as it's retrograding back and that sun is moving forward, will have a moment of Cazimi, and that's going to happen on the 6th, right, shortly after this. So on the 6th of September, at 13 degrees Virgo, we will have that moment of brilliance, that moment of genius. Often I've heard Cazimi referred to that way, that moment of our mind that has been hashing and gnawing and revisiting and trying to figure out how to move forward, and everything's pulling me back. We have that flash of insight about what we need in terms of the structure or the routines or the habits that we need, so that we have the tools to go forward to attain that vision. So I think that could be a really important day to pay attention to what's coming forward. And then we have a beautiful trine to Jupiter. We were talking a lot about how Venus and Jupiter are arguing, but we have a trine with Mercury, our mind and our desire for expansion, and the people who can teach us what we need to know, which I think is often a thing that comes forward when Jupiter's being trined. That's so exciting, and that will happen on the 4th in Earth. So practically speaking, what do we need? Who's going to train us? What is the apprenticeship style thing, the class, the tools that I need to be able to master this thing I need to go forward? I think this could be a great time period of those answers coming forward, especially in the forms of people, mentors, guides that pop up with, hey, have you thought about blank? Pay attention to that blank.
I agree with you. And I would just say this is also feeding from the Uranus station retro. That energy that you said about Mercury actually Cazimi, that having that moment of genius, I think this is Uranus as well supporting that, and everything's happening at the full moon. Well, not Cazimi, but Uranus obviously station retro is happening at the full moon. So that kind of moment of illumination, moment of aha, this lightning bolt, you're just there, dancing under the full moon, and suddenly this bolt of lightning comes in and just illuminates everything. This is the energy that's happening both in your own psyche and in the world around us as well. So I think it might be impressive and full moon, and also powerful in terms of just Earth, with the Uranus stationing retro in Taurus at the full moon, when moon is so close to the Earth. There is something around, actual Earth and our world that can respond to that.
Yeah. So we're coming up to our hour mark, and I don't want to rush through before we flush things out, but any other thoughts you have? We really haven't talked about the outer planets. Of course, so many of them are stationed or retrograde. They're not moving much. And I have a feeling we will be talking about them in 2 weeks when we meet up again. But anything else stand out to y'all as wanting to bring forward? I know, Monika, you had mentioned that just before this lunation, Saturn is going to be opposite the sun, which to me feels like it's just reinforcing what we said about it's almost like as we approach this lunation, the universe slams on the brakes. Wait a minute. We forgot something. Back up, review. And yes, it can feel frustrating, and it can feel like we're not moving forward, and it can feel like obstacles and back up, but we need to back up. And we need to take care of this body, take care of this vehicle that we're traveling in. I think anyone having health challenges, like this is a time to really have awareness of how are we supporting ourselves? What do we need to be sustainable, whether that is in terms of our outer resources or inner resources, and kind of repack for this trip. And now that we repacked, we remembered the things we forgot, and now we're ready to go again. And it's going to be better for having gone through that preparation and that pause. But it may feel really like a stop, a jolt, but it's really just a pause. And then we get to go forward with more clarity and more connection to our vision, and maybe even a little more like remembering why we're on this journey to begin with.
I think that's beautiful ending. I just don't want to add anything because you kind of summarize everything so lovely.
How about
Yeah,
some
I
tips and
agree.
tricks before we go?
Tips and tricks.
Monika,
Lovely.
why don't you restate yours, girl? Because you already gave it, but why don't you add it again?
Yeah, I think with this lunation, we're talking about visions and fairy tales, you know, and Venus is still in Leo, in that kind of house of rediscovering your childhood. Step away from Disney, step away from Disney, mom, and go and discover the fairy tale in original. If you can find The Little Mermaid and maybe read that at the full moon, you might have the insight that you do not have from, you know, the retelling of that story in a movies. So I think that might be very Piscean way, not necessarily poetry, but reading the fairy tale on the night of the full moon, very Piscean fairy tale, might give you the insight and might bring up some questions around the Venusian kind of Jupiterian topics that maybe it's what your soul needs to hear. And instead of doing, you know, very practical stuff of, I mean, this is still Saturn, you know, there is this a bit of a structure there, but instead of doing, I don't know, I feel like we're always trying to put a practical spin on our tips, and I'm very good at that with my moon in Taurus. I think this time I'm just go away, read the fairy tale, light the candle, have a bubble bath, and see what emerges from the depth.
Beautiful. Anne?
But then if you dare to go traveling, you could go to Copenhagen and check her out, The Little Mermaid. I will get very, very practical. Put your feet into water. Just take care of your feet during this full moon.
That is beautiful. I'm going to do that. I'm going to mark that on my calendar. That is so.
And have a pedicure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not too expensive one then.
I'm going to go back to that Mercury Cazimi with the sun and just say, you know, on the one hand, go with the flow. This is Piscean energy. Fish, when they're swimming, they don't really worry about an obstacle. The school of fish come to, you know, a big reef, they separate, they go around, they come back together intuitively. So just flow with whatever's happening during these 2 weeks. It's all part of the process. And also embrace that day of September 6th as perhaps listening to what your guidance is telling you. You will serve you best. You know, this is Virgo. So not how can I serve others, but what do I need that will serve me best when I'm ready to reconnect with that vision, reconnect with my school of fish and go forward. And yeah, take it easy.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye. Feel free to comment as you flow through the next 2 weeks in the descriptions below, in the comments below. Let us know how it goes. Don't forget to subscribe before you float off into Pisces land. Hit that notification bell. And as always, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Bye. Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. Astro Chat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support Astro Chat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.